It's hard for a lawyer to talk in only 8 minutes. But, I think I can. In my law practice, I represent lots of host agencies, and I advise them and answer their questions. And also, when I don't represent a host agency, I'm in a position where I can advise and answer questions and represent independent contractors of host agencies. So what I thought I would do today, since the host independent contractor model has become really the predominant model in the retail business these days, what I thought I would do today is synthesize all the questions, figure out what are the most common questions that hosts and independent contractors ask me, put up the questions, and then give you the answers. Here come the top 8 questions that host agencies, and by the way, what do I mean by host agency? I have a very, very expansive definition of host agency. I don't mean just Travel Planners International and Avoya, the super giants. I mean any fully appointed travel agency that has more than one independent contractor. You're a host agency as far as the legal issues are concerned, as far as the structure of your relationship with your ICs is concerned. You have the same legal issues and the same challenges. Okay, let's answer the questions in alternating order. Let's start with a question from ICs, the 8th most popular question that I get, ladies and gentlemen. How about this? ICs ask me, Mark, can my host require me to work exclusively with it and no other travel agencies? Okay, what's the answer? I won't ask you why, just tell me yes or no. Who says no? Okay, why? I know I said I wouldn't ask you why, but I was lying. Independent contractor, okay, very good guess, but the answer is yes, absolutely. There is absolutely no problem if your independent contractor contract says that you must work exclusively with that host and you sign it, that's your contract. Now, just because you are exclusively working with one under contract does not mean that the IRS is going to reclassify your relationship, does not mean that the contract is somehow void or unenforceable. That's just a myth in this business. The IRS, in fact, really doesn't care whether you work exclusively for just one. That's in the IRS Examiner's Manual for Independent Contractors. They say, today, it is not uncommon for independent contractors in any business to work exclusively for one company and be required to work exclusively for one company. Okay, that said, if your host is in states which look askance on exclusivity, most notably California, then that will be just one of the factors that an auditing state agency will look at. But that in and of itself, even in California, which is the toughest state on independent contractors, that alone won't cause the state to reclassify the relationship as one of employment. So the answer is yes. Okay, what do hosts ask me? Hosts ask me, this is a very common question. If my IC leaves and gets the bookings transferred to a new host, am I still entitled to the commission? What's the answer? Yes, that's right. It's like real estate. If you retain a real estate agent who finds a buyer and has you sign a contract to sell your house, and then at the last minute, the seller goes to another real estate agent and says, oh, you be my representative at closing. You all know that the first realtor gets the commission. Well, it's the same thing in travel, except where the supplier agreement says otherwise. It is lawful and it is somewhat common for suppliers to have written agreements with travel agencies that say that they will give the commission to the second host, not to the first host. Regent and Oceana say that. They say if the booking is more than 30 days old, they're going to give the commission to the second host. Okay. Now, what do ICs ask me? ICs ask me, this is a very, very common question, and the answer is not yes or no. Am I exempt from having to register as a seller of travel under seller of travel laws? Are ICs exempt? Well, the answer is, it depends. First of all, it depends on the state. There are 5 states with seller of travel registration laws, right? You guys know that. California, Florida, Hawaii, Iowa, and Washington State. All of them have special rules for independent contractors, and whether their independent contractors are exempt differs under each state's law. It's really difficult to generalize, but here's an example for you. For example, in Florida, the independent contractor is exempt if the independent contractor sells on behalf of only one host, and that host is registered in Florida, has a written contract with the seller of travel, does not receive any fee directly from the client, although you can receive the client's fee indirectly from the host, and then finally doesn't have the ability to issue tickets and travel documents. So if you meet all of those things, then you're exempt under the Florida law from having to register. Okay, hosts ask me. Hosts say, can I put my ICs on my E&O policy, or do they have to have, or should they get their own policy? Answer here is, it also depends. It depends on the insurance company. Some insurance companies allow it, some insurance companies don't allow it. Some allow it under certain conditions, such as the IC must not be incorporated, or the IC must not use a different trade name. Also, some hosts really want their ICs to get their own policies. So some of the insurance companies have specialized in IC policies, and I think that's a good idea for hosts to require the IC to get their own policy, because that protects the host. It also protects the IC if the IC has her own policy. Okay, how about this one? Getting more common here. Can my host refuse to accept my client's bookings? I'm the IC. I have someone who wants to take a trip, and I'm ready to make the sale, but it turns out that my host won't accept this sale. Can the host refuse? Yeah, the answer is, unless your IC agreement says otherwise, the host can refuse. This is a B2B relationship. That's the most important thing to remember. In a valid host-IC relationship, we're dealing with a business of the host and a business, the IC. In a B2B relationship, everyone knows that one business can refuse to do business with another business, right? That's the American way. So unless your agreement says otherwise. Okay. Hosts ask me, what's the best way that you found to avoid the specter or the risk of reclassification? So you have in your host agency, you have 10 independent contractors, and you wonder whether you're going to get audited and have the state of Wisconsin come in and audit these relationships and then decide to reclassify these of employment, and then hit you, the host, for back taxes, back unemployment insurance, back workman's comp, and whether you're going to be liable for stuff like minimum wages. You don't want your relationship reclassified by any state or the IRS as one of employment. So what do? Top 3 things in Pestronk's list. 1, require every IC to set up his or her own corporation or limited liability company. Why? Isn't that just sort of a fig leaf in the relationship? Doesn't change the substance of the relationship. The answer is that it's effective because auditors who come in will see that the IC operates as a corporation and will not audit that. Why? Because the IC corporation is then responsible for its own taxes. So it's not going to bother you, host, about taxes for the IC. If the IC doesn't pay its own taxes, the auditor will go after the IC. I've seen this in case after case, where a host has 100 independent contractors, 20 of them have their own corporations. The auditor goes through the list and just pushes aside the corporations and has no interest in auditing them. That's number 1. Number 2, require every IC to obtain a business license. It's more like a true B2B relationship if the IC obtains a business license. And finally, bill for every little service like a Regus office does. Maybe not for copies, but what? For scanning or for typing service or, of course, for backup, that sort of thing. The more you can bill for, the more it looks like a true B2B relationship to an auditor. Okay, ICs ask me, when I leave, what can I do to get my pending commissions and bookings? Wow, this is a tough one. If you see, the host has all the leverage here. The host is holding the money that it owes to you if you're an IC, but how do you get it if you've already left and you've already made the host very upset by leaving? This is tough. You really have to negotiate. You have to come to an agreement with your old host, and the agreement typically will say that the old host agrees to remit the commissions as the commissions are received in the future, in the months or years ahead. In return for that, any business that you transfer without the host permission, you have to agree to remit back to the old host the commission split that would have belonged to the old host. Now that's a complicated agreement, but that's really the only solution to this sort of problem. And it requires 4 parties' participation. It requires the participation of the old host, you, the IC, the new host, and really suppliers as well to get this all done. But sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars are at stake here. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a big problem for ICs. Those of you who have switched hosts probably know what I'm talking about. And then finally, the most popular question that I get asked, Mark, do you happen to have a sample independent contractor contract that you could send me for free? Well, for decades, the answer was no. Hell no. But as I am getting old and mellow, I've decided to change my mind. And I have posted a sample independent contractor contract on my website, and you can find it at, well, don't even bother to write this down, pestronk.com sample ica.html, don't bother with that. Just remember pestronk.com because I'm going to put a link to it right on my home page. So on my home page at pestronk.com, it will say, click here for a sample independent contractor contract. I'll get that done tonight. I'll switch the place where you can do that. Okay? So remember, this contract is worth what you pay for it. And remember that you have to tailor it to your particular needs, and that you absolutely must get a lawyer's advice, an expert lawyer's advice on what it should say. Don't use the sample as your contract without getting a lawyer involved. Okay, and I have one other question, and that is, Mark, do we have time for follow-up questions? The answer is no, I'm sorry, but I'll be at the break. Thank you all very much.